So we've gone into an organisation, we've implemented the changes, we've made the improvements. The big killer question that everyone asks, the question on everyone's lips is, how do we embed that change into the fabric of the organisation? How do we make it part of their very DNA? That's what we're going to be discussing today. So the contents of this session. Firstly, we'll be discussing why does change stick? Or why doesn't it stick, probably more importantly. What are the things, or more specifically, what is the one thing that ensures that change will stick in an organisation? And you've probably heard this phrase bandied about quite a lot. It's the culture, it's the corporate culture, it's the organisational culture. That's the key to making things stick. Well, it is, but how is that culture shaped? What can we do to shape that culture? And what are the different types of people we're going to have to influence in order to shape that culture? The way we do that is through what I term the forgotten skill set. And I will be talking you through that in a little bit of detail here, but there will be sessions in a lot more detail actually inside the course. The last three we're not going to cover in this session. I will cover in later sessions as part of the actual course in a lot more detail. So looking at Dilts change model. According to this, all these things have to be in place in order to achieve success when you're implementing change. Now, don't disagree with any of that, but what I do think is there's also an underlying thing in that we have to put in the desire or the need to change up front or as part of that process going through. So the things that we need to change to really make it stick are those beliefs or that culture, and the things that actually change that culture, the behaviour and actions of the leadership within the environment. So what determines whether it sticks? Okay, it is, as I said before, those beliefs, the behaviours and the actions of individuals all form part of the makeup of the culture of an organisation. Now, make no mistake, these are the most difficult to influence, which is why they're often ignored, they're often left. People will do the implementation, they'll make the changes, they'll make the improvements. They may not concentrate too much on the stakeholder management, on changing the behaviours, and people use that term a little bit too loosely as well. Stakeholder management, what does that actually mean? It means getting the people you're actually dealing with to do what you want them to do and to exhibit the behaviours that you want them to exhibit. In order for any change to remain in place, it has to be accepted as the norm or the modus operandi, or quite simply just the way we do things around here. It has to become business as usual. Now, the only way it can become business as usual is if people see it as business as usual. So they've adapted their behaviours and their actions so that the changes that have gone in place, the things that you've implemented, are now just BAU. They're what they do as part of the day job. So it's got to become part of that culture of the organisation. If it doesn't, it'll always be the stuff that they have to do as well as the day job, and it'll be dropped the first chance they get. So what do we mean when we say culture? Some associated words and phrases. It's the way of life, it's the customs, it's the traditions, the conduct that we display, the behaviours, the manners. Some of the definitions we've got listed here, but the key one for me is the one right at the bottom there. It's the way we do things around here. It's, if you ask someone, how do you do this, they will tell you that this is the way we do it, and they're proud to tell you that. Now that's what we have to get in order to make things stick. So, how are cultures shaped? Largely a direct result of the behaviour, values and beliefs of the leadership. That is the key one there. There's some others listed here, but if you haven't managed to convert those behaviours, values and beliefs of the leadership team, then they won't demonstrate those. Other people won't then try to emulate those. You've probably heard the Sen Delaney term, shadow of a leader. It is probably the truest term that I've ever heard. People may not always do as you say, but if you're in a position of power, and a lot of people don't realise the position of power and the position of influence that they're actually in, people will always do as you do. They will always try to emulate you if you're the leader, because they see that those behaviours, those actions as the things that got you into the position that you're in, and because you're the leader, they must be the right things to do. So one of the key ways that this is exhibited is by the embracing of something called Gemba management. You may have heard that termed as go, look, see, process confirmation. They're different terms for the same thing. It's visibility in the Gemba, in the place where the value's added, on the shop floor, in the workplace, and it's that demonstration of different behaviours from the management team, that they buy into everything that's gone on, everything that's been implemented. So it is this first part that is the key to shaping the organisational culture. So how do we shape the behaviour, values and beliefs of the leadership? Not that easy, you might say, but there are ways to do it. A good first step is to map the network. So map who's for change, who's against change, levels of influence, what type of relationship which person has with who you need to get into, if you like, to influence someone who may then be able to influence the person you actually need to influence if you don't have a direct line to them. So stakeholder map is a very good starting point, and then you can decide which moves you need to make. So some types of people you may encounter. You got the well poisoners, the pioneers, the old dogs and the settlers. As you can see from the matrix here, you can see roughly where they are on their orientation towards change and the level of involvement in that. Settlers and the old dogs, quite passive. Pioneers and well poisoners, quite active but at opposite ends of the spectrum. So, what sort of things are you looking for with these different types of people? Well, your well poisoners, they'll find ways to sabotage and delay the advances. Talking a lot, doing nothing, setting up committees that promise a lot and deliver nothing, spreading rumours, discrediting people intentionally, avoiding taking responsibility and finding reasons why not. They can be terrific allies if they can be turned. It isn't a large percentage of this type of person that can be turned. So be very wary of them, and you need to deal with these in a very specialised way, which again I'm not going to go into today, but in the course we will run a session on how to deal specifically with the well poisoners. Pioneers, they're the visionaries, they're energetic, they get things done. Your settlers, they'll feed the pioneers, they'll help them when they need to. They'll sort of sit on the fence until the time's right, and then they will spark into action occasionally as and when the need arises. And then you've got the old dogs who, to be honest, you probably aren't going to change no matter what. They're just going to continue going on about how good it was in the old days. But as long as you know where they are and who they are, the type of people you don't necessarily need to waste your time on. So how does this benefit us? How does knowing the type of people that we're dealing with help us figure out who needs to be worked on? Some of the questions you might want to ask to help you work out what moves to make. So, who has a need that I can satisfy or I must satisfy, either business or a specific person? Who do you know who is respected by the people you need to influence? Who do you know that you suspect might be respected by the people you need to influence? If you don't know anyone, then what research will you need to do to find out? What chains or links between people can you create? And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, about creating those chains and those links with your stakeholders, building that rapport with them and getting that trust. And what value could you create for the person or people in those chains? An example of specific actions that can be taken to build, support and achieve consensus. So it's, talk to the new people, persuade certain people, get people moved out, point out the benefits, decide what approach to take, and have a specific plan around stakeholder management. Don't leave it to chance. Don't just think, oh, it'll come right. Plan it out, decide what needs to be done with whom. Okay, so how do we do this? We've covered what we need to do to make change stick, but as I said before, that's the easy bit. Now we get into how we go about changing those beliefs, those behaviours and the actions of the key people in the organisation. This can only be achieved by influencing, negotiating, demonstrating the benefits, showing them what's in it for me, and getting those stakeholders to want to do things differently. They either have to have a desire or a need to do things differently in order to do something differently. Unless you can get them to the point where they have that desire or that need, they'll pay you all the lip service in the world and their actions won't match up with that, and you won't get the change to stick. That is the one key message that you should take away from this session. So some people say, these are the soft skills. Oh, this is fluffy stuff. Or the people skills. Some people have it, some people don't. It can't really be taught to people who don't have it. That is absolute trash. Garbage. This is an exact a science as physics, maths, chemistry, you name it. Its common name is sales, but not sales as you probably know it. It's not the dodgy geezer down the market or the guy in the shop who pounces on you as you walk through the door. This is true salesmanship. This is about building rapport with people, building trust with people, building a long-term relationship so that when you tell them that something is the right way to go, they'll trust your judgment and they'll go with it. Or in other words, how we use these exact techniques to build solid relationships with high degrees of rapport and trust in order to get our stakeholders to actively want to exhibit the desired behaviours and actions that will in turn shape the culture into one which embraces the changes introduced as the new norm, so that things become just the way we do things around here. So why is being a change agent or a consultant like being a salesperson? Well, it's all about influencing and persuading people to make a decision to adopt or buy a new way of doing things. It often involves building a case for change with a lot of people. The skills of qualification, presentation, negotiation, closing and implementing are exactly the same. There's often competition, either internal or external. There will be resistance and objections. If you can't handle those, you shouldn't be doing this job. It is a people thing. It's Vilfredo Pareto developed a law you've all probably heard of called the 80-20 rule. 80-20 law. Now, in the line of work that we do, it's 80% about the people, 20% about the tools. A lot of people have that the wrong way around. If you get the people part right, the tools are easy to learn and the tools will slide in by themselves once you have the people where you want the people. So why is being a change agent or consultant much tougher than being a salesperson? Because in terms of a salesperson, buyers expect them to sell and they're prepared to be led. Yeah, salespeople are trained to sell, e.g. they're trained to qualify, to present, to negotiate. Salespeople are motivated by targets to close sales. Yeah, change agents, consultants, some of the buyers, some of the people you're dealing with have very different expectations. They're unlikely to have a strong sales background, and they can be motivated by many different things. Yeah, the top salespeople recognise the skill and the profession that they're in, and they develop a strong sense of identity. Change agents can be quite cynical about the profession and not even identify themselves as salespeople. Salespeople, when selling, normally have only one agenda: to sell, to get the deal. As a change agent or a consultant, there may be many agendas. There's politics going on, internal and external. As far as a salesperson goes, it's easy to criticise an external company if things go wrong. If you're an internal customer, you'll have to be careful about criticising a change agent or consultant. What are some of the classic objections you're going to come up against? We just haven't got the time. Or it's not high enough on my list of priorities. Boss wants it, but I don't. I want it, but my boss doesn't. Tried that before, but didn't work then. Might have worked for XYZ company, but we're different. Won't work here. We're already doing that. Can't see how all the effort that we'll have to put in will bring us the results we're looking for. Or I just don't have the resources. Now, you must have heard at least half of those at least once in your career. I know I've heard every single one of them countless numbers of times. So what you need are the ways to overcome those objections. So what I'd like you to do is go away and just have a think about certain situations where those have come up. Think about how you dealt with them, and think about how you could deal with them going forward in view of what we've talked about in this session so far. So the key in all this is building rapport. As we've said before, the exact science of how we use these exact techniques to build solid relationships with high degrees of rapport and trust in order to get our stakeholders to actively want to exhibit the desired behaviours and actions that will in turn shape the culture into one which embraces the changes introduced as the new norm. Okay, so you got a definition there of rapport. That is the key. If you can get that with everyone that you meet, everyone that you deal with, the changes that you introduce will go in smoother, they'll last longer, they'll be embedded, they'll form part of the DNA of that organisation.